In 2025, North America's dairy industry witnessed a shocking turning point when Mexico, the largest market for U.S. milk, rejected over 250,000 gallons at the Texas-Coahuila border and signed a 7-year, $3.2 billion dairy supply contract with Canada, despite U.S. milk being 15% cheaper. This event is not merely a shift in suppliers, but reflects a profound global trend. Trust and transparency are surpassing price as the deciding factors in the agricultural supply chain. This analysis delves into the reasons behind Mexico's rejection of U.S. milk, Canada's strategic advantages, the economic and social impacts on the U.S. dairy industry, lessons from this shift, and broader implications for the future of global agricultural trade. 1. Background: Mexico's rejection of U.S. milk, a trade shock. In July 2025, over 250,000 gallons of U.S. milk were held in refrigerated tanks at the Texas-Coahuila border, ultimately rejected or destroyed without formal explanation from Mexico. That same week, Canada secured a 7-year, $3.2 billion dairy supply contract with Mexico, hailed as one of the most stable bilateral agreements between the two nations. According to the U.S. Dairy Export Council, in 2023, Mexico accounted for over 20% of total U.S. dairy exports, importing hundreds of millions of gallons annually at an average price of $2.65 per gallon, about 15% cheaper than Canadian milk, approximately $3.05 per gallon. With $1,000, Mexican distributors once purchased 378 gallons of U.S. milk, enough to supply 250 households for a week, but now can only buy 310 gallons of Canadian milk, a nearly 20% reduction. Yet Mexico willingly pays more for less, driven by a clear consumer message: we need to know where our milk comes from. This shift stems from Mexico's updated food import standards in 2025, requiring a ban on growth hormones like RBST, a ban on animal byproducts in feed, and full traceability from individual cows to the final milk carton. These standards align with a global trend toward ethical consumption, particularly among young, urban, and globally connected consumers in Mexico. While the U.S.'s large-scale production system, processing thousands of cows rapidly, struggles to meet these requirements, Canada has been preparing since the 1980s, with a QR code-based traceability system that provides detailed information on farms, feed, and cow care practices, earning Mexico's trust. 2. Canada's strategic advantage: transparency, ethics, and long-term vision. Canada has built a dairy production model focused on quality, transparency, and ethics over 4 decades, providing a significant competitive edge. Advanced traceability system: every Canadian milk carton carries a QR code linking to specific farm details, feed practices, and cow care routines. According to Dairy Farmers of Canada, 100% of exported products meet ethical and environmental standards, enabling Canada to comply with stringent requirements in Mexico and markets like Germany, France, and Japan. Stringent regulations: Canada bans RBST growth hormones, long-term antibiotics, and animal byproducts, e.g. ground bone, in feed. Its production quota system, in place since the 1970s, controls supply to prevent oversupply, stabilizing prices and protecting farmers from bankruptcy due to price wars. Consumer trust: Canada sells not just milk, but values. Peace of mind about a clean, transparent, and environmentally friendly product. This resonates strongly with Mexican consumers, where media campaigns emphasize the importance of knowing food origins. Global market strategy: the Mexico contract strengthens Canada's position as a reliable supplier while expanding its influence in demanding markets. Canadian powdered milk sells in Europe and Japan for $14–15 per 900 grain, 10–20% more than U.S. equivalents, yet is preferred due to its transparency. The $3.2 billion Mexico contract not only secures revenue, but also positions Canada as a model in the trust economy, where ethical and transparent practices are a key competitive advantage. 3. Impact on the U.S. dairy industry, a crisis of trust and economic fallout. The U.S. dairy industry, once seen as the world's food hub, is facing a severe crisis of trust with far-reaching consequences. Loss of a key market. Mexico, the largest buyer of U.S. milk for nearly a decade, switched to Canada, costing millions of gallons in annual exports. The U.S. Dairy Export Council projects a potential 20% loss of global market share over the next decade, equating to $1.6 billion annually, with total U.S. milk exports valued at $7.5 to $8 billion per year. Small farmer crisis. From 2022 to 2025, approximately 6,000 small dairy farms, 10% of the sector, closed due to inability to compete. Surviving farms lose an average of $100 per week, $62,000 per year, as production costs, $1.10 and $1.20 per gallon, exceed selling prices, $1.80 and $1.90 per gallon. A 17% rise in feed costs since 2023 exacerbates the situation. A three-generation Iowa farm, once supplying 10,000 gallons monthly to Mexico, now faces an 8,000-gallon weekly surplus, losing $2,000, $3,000 per month, forcing staff cuts from 12 to 2. Outdated production system. The U.S.'s large-scale production, processing thousands of cows rapidly, uses RBST and animal byproducts in feed and traces only at the batch level, failing to meet Mexico's individual traceability standards. This makes U.S. milk appear less transparent and ethical to global consumers. Social and cultural impacts. Small farms, once symbols of American self-reliance and national pride, are disappearing. Over 56% of farmers in states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Vermont are considering selling land to pay debts, threatening arable land and traditional farming knowledge. An Iowa farmer's confession, unable to wake his sons at 4 a.m. for a job that no longer pays, reflects despair and a sense of abandonment by the system. While large industrial farms can pivot to domestic markets with lower prices, backed by strong finances and legal teams, small farmers, lacking long-term contracts or stable distribution networks, are the hardest hit. 4. Global trend. Trust as the new currency. The Mexico incident reflects a broader global trend where trust, transparency, and ethics are becoming paramount in agricultural trade. Changing consumer behavior, consumers in Europe, Japan, and urban Mexico prioritize products with clear origins, no hormones, and environmental friendliness. For example, Canadian powdered milk in Europe and Japan sells for $14 to $15 per 900 grams, 10-20% more than U.S. equivalents, but is preferred due to QR code traceability, detailing farm origins, feed, and production processes. Economic forecast. The OECD predicts that countries with transparent supply chains will see a 28 to 35% export advantage in the next decade. A nation exporting $10 billion in agricultural goods could reach $13.5 billion, driven by credibility rather than volume. This underscores trust as the most valuable commodity in global trade. Pressure on other industries. This trend extends beyond dairy. U.S. beef faces European rejection due to clenbuterol hormones, and GMO grains are excluded from Japanese and German supply chains. Other U.S. industries, from food to manufacturing, risk a silent boycott if they fail to adapt to demands for transparency and ethics. Policy and investment impacts. Trade agreements, tax policies, and global investment flows are shifting to favor nations with transparent supply chains. Canada's quota system and ethical standards are capitalizing on this trend, while the U.S. lags behind. 5. Lessons for the U.S. Reimagining the production model. The U.S. dairy industry stands at a critical juncture, requiring strategic changes to regain trust and global market share. Production system reform. The U.S. must invest heavily in individual traceability systems, eliminate RBST and animal byproducts in feed, and shift toward sustainable production. While costly and requiring policy changes, these reforms are essential to meet global standards and recover export markets. Support for small farmers, federal subsidies, worth billions, often favor large agribusinesses, leaving small farmers struggling. Targeted programs, such as support for traceability technology, long-term contracts, and stable distribution networks, are needed to protect family farms. Shifting domestic consumer mindset, U.S. consumers must be encouraged to question food origins, as in Europe and Mexico. Public education campaigns and transparent labeling can build domestic trust, preventing a similar crisis of confidence at home. Learning from Canada. Canada's quota system and traceability model offer valuable lessons. Implementing QR codes on milk packaging to provide farm-to-carton information could help the U.S. rebuild credibility. 6. Broader implications. Trust in the global supply chain. Mexico's rejection of U.S. milk and choice of Canada is not just a commercial setback, but a warning of a shifting global value system. In the trust economy, where consumers and markets prioritize transparency, ethics, and environmental responsibility, nations that fail to adapt risk being left behind. Canada, with its advanced traceability, strict regulations, and ethical commitments, is leading this trend. Not only in Mexico, but also in demanding markets like Europe and Japan. Conversely, the U.S.'s maximize output model, once a symbol of post-war efficiency, is now seen as outdated amid new demands. With 6,000 dairy farms shuttered from 2022 to 2025 and a potential $1.5 to $1.6 billion annual export market loss, the U.S. risks losing not just revenue but its place in the global food supply chain. The image of thousands of gallons of milk dumped under Mexico's desert sun is not just a waste of resources, but an erosion of faith in made-in-USA quality. Meanwhile, Canada's cautious approach, clear traceability, and production controls are steadily capturing market share, not because it is stronger, but because it better understands global needs, transparency, and long-term commitment. The question for the U.S. is no longer how to produce more, but how to regain trust. To avoid falling further behind, the U.S. must urgently reform its production system, support small farmers, and encourage consumers to demand food origins. This incident serves as a reminder that in the modern global supply chain, trust, not price, is the most valuable currency.